Hey everyone. You know how sometimes it feels like you're hearing English but not really getting it, like it's a secret code? Well, today we are going to try to crack that code. We are taking a deep dive into listening comprehension, something we all do every single day, especially those of you learning English as a second language. We've got a huge stack of really good resources for this one. We're going to be drawing from enhancing English listening comprehension skills. We've got some answers straight from improving English listening skills, answering common questions. And we're also going to look at techniques from listening skills, techniques to improve comprehension. And we'll also be grabbing some guidance from Understanding Spoken English, a study guide. So this is like your fast track to going beyond just hearing English to really understanding it, picking out those key pieces, those aha moments, and really just getting those solid strategies that are going to make you a much better listener.
Yeah, and to kick things off, let's just think about this for a sec. We put so much work into speaking, reading, and writing in a new language, but listening, that often gets overlooked, but it really is the foundation. It's like the bedrock of how we communicate. And it's important to kind of be aware of the difference between just having those sound waves hit your ears, that's passive hearing, and active listening, which is like really engaging with what's being said.
Okay, active listening.
Yeah.
We hear that term a lot. But when we actually break it down, what does that actually look like?
Well, all of these sources actually break it down into 5 key elements. And the first one, probably the toughest one these days, paying attention. It's all about trying to minimize those distractions and getting that mental energy focused on what the speaker is saying. Then there's understanding. It's not just hearing the words, it's actually figuring out what they mean, like processing the grammar. Then you've got interpreting, where you start to think about the context, the speaker's intent, and even like what's not being said directly. And then the fourth part, responding. This doesn't have to be some big, long answer. It could be just a nod or even like, uh-huh, just something to show that you're really tuned in. And finally, remembering, actually holding on to that important information that you heard. And it's this whole process, this cycle that takes you from hearing sounds to actually understanding.
Right, that makes total sense. So this unsung hero, this listening, why is it so important for you, our listener? Why do we need to get better at it?
Well, think about it. It affects pretty much every part of your life. Like relationships, those really work well when you actually hear and understand each other, not just waiting for your turn to talk. Learning, whether it's in a classroom or just out in the world, that relies so much on being able to take in information through listening. Problem solving, that usually means understanding different points of view, and that starts with actually listening to those views. And probably the most practical part is that good listening, it helps you avoid a ton of misunderstandings. I mean, how many times have things gone wrong because somebody just wasn't really listening?
Yeah, too many times to count, I'm sure.
Exactly. And specifically for people who are learning English, active listening has even more benefits. It actually helps you learn the natural rhythm of the language, the intonation, the correct way to say things, and all of that feeds right back into how fluently you can speak. It's like this awesome cycle of getting better and better.
So we know listening is super important. But let's be real. Figuring out spoken English, sometimes it's like trying to catch smoke. It's tough.
Beyond not knowing enough words or struggling with grammar, what are some of the things that make listening to English so hard?
Our sources really lay that out clearly. One of the first things you run into is speed. Native English speakers, we tend to talk fast. And if you're still getting used to the language, that speed can be a bit overwhelming. But it's not just the speed, it's how all those words kind of mush together. And that's what's called connected speech.
Connected speech, that sounds like a whole other world of confusing stuff. Can you give us some real life examples of how that actually messes people up? Sure. Think about something as basic as an apple. But when someone says it, it sounds more like a napple. That's something called liaison, where a consonant sound at the end of one word kind of links up with a vowel sound at the beginning of the next. Then there's this thing called assimilation. That's where sounds actually change a bit to sound more like the sounds next to them, like 10 pounds. That can end up sounding like 10 pounds because that end sound kind of shifts a bit to get ready for that P sound that's coming next. Then you've got elision. Elision is when a sound just poof disappears, like next day gets shortened to next day. And then there's intrusion. That's where an extra sound pops up. So law and order can become law and order. And all these tiny changes between words, they can make it so hard to pick out individual words, especially if you're expecting everything to be nice and separate. I mean, imagine someone hearing an apple and thinking, wait, a maple, what's going on? It can lead to some funny misunderstandings.
Yeah, those small changes make a huge difference. What else does spoken English throw at us?
Well, there are these things called weak forms. They're those little unstressed grammar words like to and of that get all squished down. They're barely audible, almost like they're getting swallowed up. And then, of course, there's this whole universe of accents and dialects. How English is spoken in one part of the world or even one part of a country can be so different from what you're used to. And we can't forget about idioms and slang, all those colorful, informal sayings that you won't find in a regular textbook. Like, imagine hearing, "It's raining cats and dogs," and picturing, actual animals falling from the sky.
Right. Those can be pretty confusing if you're not in the know.
Absolutely. The sources also make a really good point about nonverbal cues, things like body language, facial expressions, and tone of voice. These add a whole other layer of meaning on top of the words themselves. And then there's just real world stuff like background noise, which can make it hard to focus. And sometimes you come across words you don't know. Or people use grammar in a casual way that's different from what you learned in class. And then every speaker has their own style. Some people mumble, some talk really softly, some use super complicated sentences. All that can make it easier or harder to understand them.
Wow, it's amazing we can understand each other at all. So now that we've laid out all these challenges, what can we do about it? What are some real steps you can take as a listener to make your listening foundation stronger? Let's start with the basics, like the essential tools everyone needs.
Right. So there are these core skills that are super important, and it all starts with focus and concentration. And in this day and age, with so many distractions around us all the time, this is something you really have to work at. Our sources have some practical tips for this. Find a quiet place. Try some mindfulness exercises to train your brain to stay in the moment. Engage with what you're listening to, like ask yourself questions as you go along. Start with shorter listening sessions and then slowly increase the time. And even pay attention to how you're sitting or standing. Good posture can actually help you stay alert. It's like training a muscle, but for your attention.
Yeah, I can see how those things would really help cut through the noise. So what's the next essential skill we need in our toolbox?
The next one is phonemic awareness. This is about learning to hear the individual sounds that make up English words. The sources even talk about the IPA, that's the International Phonetic Alphabet, which is a really cool way of writing down all the different sounds humans can make when they speak. It's like a universal pronunciation guide. A really practical thing you can do here is practice with minimal pairs. These are words that sound almost the same except for one sound, like pen and pan or C and C. Training your ear to pick up on those tiny differences, that's super important. If you can't hear the individual sounds properly, understanding the whole word becomes way harder.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like you're trying to build something, but all the pieces are blurry. What about vocabulary and grammar? Where do they fit into all of this?
Okay, so we're focusing on listening today. But a good base in vocabulary and grammar, that's definitely important too. The sources say that you should concentrate on high-frequency words. Those are the words that get used all the time. And really make sure you've got those basic grammar rules down. Even if you miss a word or two while you're listening, if you've got a good grasp of the basics, you can use those context clues to figure out what's being said. It's like filling in the blanks.
Ah, yes, those context clues, the life savers of language learning. So what are some other basic skills that are important to develop as a listener?
Well, there's predicting and anticipating. This is about using what you already know about the topic and paying attention to keywords that give you hints about what's coming next. It's like your brain is kind of rehearsing the conversation ahead of time so it can process things more easily. And for longer listening, note-taking is a lifesaver. Come up with a system that works for you. Maybe use abbreviations, symbols, focus on getting down the main points instead of every single word. The sources suggest reviewing your notes right after you listen to make sure it all sinks in.
Those are some really solid, practical steps. So how do we go beyond the basics? What are some of those intermediate techniques to really boost your listening comprehension?
At this level, we start to get a bit more strategic with our listening. One important technique is to be really aware of the difference between listening for gist and listening for specific information. Listening for gist, that's about getting the big picture, the main idea, without getting lost in the details. It's like seeing the forest, not just the trees. So you might listen once, just answer the question, what's this all about? And then you could listen again, but this time zero in on details like names, dates, or specific facts. That's listening for specific information. This two-step approach can really help when you're dealing with longer or more complicated stuff.
That sounds so much smarter than just trying to absorb everything at once.
Okay.
What other techniques are important at this intermediate stage?
You got to start working on connected speech. Really immerse yourself in authentic spoken English, like podcasts, movies, real conversations. There's this technique called shadowing, where you listen to a short bit and then repeat it right away, exactly how you heard it. This can really help your ear tune into the natural flow of connected speech. Then there's transcription, where you actually try to write down everything you hear. That's another awesome way to catch all those subtle sound changes. And at this level, really paying attention to those weak forms, those little grammar words that get all squished down, becomes super important.
So it's all about getting used to how English really sounds, not just the textbook version.
Yeah.
Now, how do we handle all those different accents?
Right. Understanding different accents, that's a big part of becoming a better listener. And the key here is just listen to as many different accents as you can. Try to find English spoken by people from different parts of the world, different countries, different regions. Notice how their pronunciation changes. There are also a ton of resources online that can help you with specific accents. The more you expose yourself to variety, the better your brain will get at adapting.
Makes sense. And how do we start to make sense of those tricky idioms and slang words?
Figuring out idioms and slang, that's something you'll work on constantly. Start by learning some common idioms from books or websites. But what's even more important is paying attention to the context when you come across them in movies, TV shows, or conversations. Don't be shy about asking what something means if you hear an expression you don't know. A lot of times, the words around the idiom will give you clues about the meaning.
Good advice. Context is everything. What's the last intermediate technique we should be thinking about?
The final one here is inferencing and drawing conclusions. This is about going beyond the literal words and really thinking about what the speaker is trying to say. Pay attention to their tone of voice, their body language if you can see them, and the whole situation to understand those hidden meanings. Ask yourself, why might they be saying this, or what's the message behind the words? It's about becoming an active listener who really engages with the whole message, not just the words on the surface.
Right, we've covered the basics, and then we leveled up with some really good intermediate strategies. Now, for those of you who are aiming for near native level understanding, what are those advanced techniques you need to master?
All right, so if you really want to take your listening to that next level, we got to go deeper. One big one is critical listening. This isn't just about understanding what's being said, it's about analyzing it. Think about the arguments being made. What's the speaker trying to do? Are they stating facts or opinions? Are they using any fancy language tricks to persuade you? Is listening with a more critical and thoughtful ear.
That sounds like a very active and engaged way of listening. What else makes someone an advanced listener?
Well, you got to get good at listening in tough environments. Practice listening when there's background noise and slowly make that noise louder. This will help you develop selective attention. That's your brain's ability to block out distractions and just focus on the speaker's voice. Understanding humor and irony, that's another sign of an advanced listener. This often depends on really understanding the culture, the speaker's tone of voice, maybe even some shared experience. Missing humor or irony can lead to misunderstandings, even for people who are quite fluent.
Humor and irony, definitely some of the trickier parts of language that require you to be on the same wavelength as the speaker. Does note-taking change at this advanced level?
Yeah, it does. Advanced note-taking for those complex lectures, presentations, or big discussions, that might mean using shorthand so you can keep up, or maybe creating visual aids like mind maps or diagrams to organize all that info. You could even record the audio always with permission, of course, so you can go back and listen again or analyze it more deeply. And for those aiming for the very top, our sources mention simultaneous interpreting. That's where you're listening and translating at the same time, which requires incredibly fast processing and top-notch listening comprehension.
Wow, simultaneous interpreting, that's next level stuff. So we've talked about a ton of skills and techniques. What are some actual tools and resources our listeners can use, like starting today, to practice all this stuff?
The great thing is there's a whole bunch of awesome resources out there. Podcasts and audiobooks, those are amazing because they cover every topic you can imagine. There are different levels of difficulty, and a lot of them even have transcripts you can follow along with. And a lot of them let you adjust the playback speed, which is super helpful. Movies and TV shows are great too because you get to hear natural, everyday English and all sorts of accents. You can use subtitles at first, but try watching without them to challenge yourself.
Yeah.
And pay attention to things like body language and facial expressions because they're part of the message too.
Oh, definitely a lot more fun than just doing grammar drills. What about resources that are a bit more structured?
Oh, yeah. There are loads of online listening exercises and quizzes. These are specifically designed to give you targeted practice. Websites like ESL Lab and BBC Learning English are fantastic for this. They offer exercises for all different levels, and you get feedback right away on how you did. Language learning apps have also come a long way, and a lot of them include interactive listening lessons that adjust to your level as you go. Apps like Duolingo, Memrise, Babbel, and Rosetta Stone, they've all got great ways to practice your listening.
And for those of you who are looking to actually talk with other English speakers,
Well, finding a language exchange partner is awesome for that. You get real-world practice and you can get personalized feedback. Platforms like HelloTalk, Tandem, and Speaky, they can connect you with native English speakers who are learning your language so you can help each other out. And don't underestimate YouTube. There are so many YouTube channels that are all about helping English learners get better at listening. They have exercises, tutorials, they explain idioms, they show you real conversations. You can even find channels that focus on dictation, where you write down what you hear.
it sounds like there are so many ways to immerse yourself in English. No matter what you're into or how you like to learn, there's something out there. Now, let's be honest. Everyone gets frustrated when they're learning a new language. What are some common challenges people face with listening, and how can we overcome them?
Feeling overwhelmed, that's a huge one. It's so common when you're tackling listening comprehension. The trick is to break everything down into smaller, manageable steps. Don't try to do too much at once. Set realistic goals for each listening session and celebrate those small wins. And don't be afraid to use easier materials when you need a little boost. Losing motivation, that happens to everyone. The best way to fight that is to find stuff that actually interests you. Maybe it's something related to your hobbies or what's going on in the world. Find a study buddy to keep you company and hold each other accountable. And never forget why you started learning English in the first place.
Those are really good tips for staying on track. What about specific problems people have with listening itself?
Yeah, a lot of people struggle with fast speech. And the best thing you can do is just expose yourself to it gradually. Start with slower audio and then slowly increase the speed. Focus on those common connected speech patterns we talked about and use that speed control feature to slow things down at first. Listening to the same thing multiple times at different speeds can be really helpful too. If you have trouble with unfamiliar accents, again, it's just about consistent exposure. Find English spoken by people from all over the place. There are online resources that specialize in accent training. And most importantly, don't get discouraged by mistakes. Making mistakes is a natural part of learning. Instead of seeing them as failures, analyze them. Figure out where you went wrong and use that to get better. Remember, it's about progress, not being perfect.
That's some really positive and helpful advice. So as we wrap up our deep dive into English listening comprehension, what's the main message we want you to take away?
The biggest thing to remember is that getting better at listening, it's not a race you run and then you're done. It's a lifelong journey. Make a conscious effort to practice listening every day, even if it's just for a few minutes. Be curious. Explore new topics, different kinds of spoken English. Always challenge yourself. Regularly look back and see how far you've come and set new goals that you know you can reach. And stay current. Keep up with what's happening in the world. Listen to new media. Connect with other learners online. The language is always changing, so you gotta stay engaged.
So mastering listening comprehension, it is a journey, but with all the tips and strategies we've talked about today, you've got a seriously powerful toolkit to help you navigate it. Really understanding spoken English is not just about learning a language, it's about connecting with people on a deeper level, getting a richer understanding of the world around you, and growing as a person. Every time you really listen, you're taking a step in the right direction.
And building on that, here's something to think about as you move forward. We've been talking about how so much of communication goes beyond words. It's also about those subtle nonverbal cues. So how might cultural differences in those nonverbal styles affect how we understand spoken English in different situations? What can you do to become more aware of those potential cultural differences? It's a whole other fascinating layer in the world of language and communication.